Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together to welcome Venu Reddy, MD India Ecosystem.
Thank you. Thank you, folks. The last leg of the event, I presume. So, one of the things that when I was trying to prepare for the presentation, I was trying to figure out how exactly am I going to present, what exactly I'm going to present to an audience like this. There's very little that you would really not have heard about, so there's no point in trying to go and preach something completely new. So maybe think about a few things that raises a few questions for you, or makes you to rethink a few of the aspects that you have already thought about. And the area, as the slide says, is mitigating data risk. Here, we will not talk about technology. I will not tell you what tools to pick, what tools not to pick, and how to work with them. We'll talk about the way we would, or we have been seeing people looking at data in a way that makes it successful for them to really mitigate the risks that they are seeing because of the amount of data that they are collecting. So, in one of the surveys that we have done, we tried to understand the state of the affairs when it comes to data and governance itself. The 7% at the leftmost there might be the most scariest part, but it's not like the other areas are necessarily any good. The part that we really wanted to really look at is the data governance policies. 38% of the companies are still working on, struggling with, or investing in the data governance policies itself, right? Now, in one sense, it's good that they're working on it, good that it is on their list, and in one sense, it is an ongoing process itself. It's not something that you have to just do it once and then after that forget it, because the data, the type of data that is being collected is also changing. So, with this marker there, starts the very interesting and I guess the theme of the presentation itself, the balancing act. Everybody wants to collect data. Every business person wants to collect as much data as possible and do whatever they want to do and hope that somebody is going to take the responsibility of the data, both securing it and doing whatever they need to do with that. So, why are they collecting data? The few obvious points, it really starts making a business difference for them. The reason why I want to start talking about that is I want you to understand the mindset that they are going with. It helps them be faster to the market. It helps them better understand the customer and able to customize information to the customer. It helps them decrease the cost of delivery itself, the cost of sale itself. The longer the sales process of getting somebody as a customer, the longer the cost. The shorter it is, they're saving money for the company. So, with this kind of mindset and the degree of impact that the data has for these organizations itself, for your organizations itself, the question really comes out to be, what data to collect? I know this is the most simplest and basic question, but it also has an impact on everything that you guys will have to do. What data to collect? And where do you keep the data? Do you collect the data on the client device, on the mobile phone and keep it there and just say, hey, the device is not mine, the data is of the individual and I'm a bit okay with that? Or are you going to allow some of that data to come back into your infrastructure and hence you need to start identifying which data to keep? So, what data to collect and where do you want to keep it? Now, if this question gets answered, then comes the interesting next layer of questions that are coming up. How do you collect the data? What's the source of the data itself? Remember, the business guys are expecting to collect data so that they can do some analysis on that and really make an impact on the business. So the quality of the data starts making a difference there. So what do you collect? Where do you collect it from? How do you authenticate the data? Somebody puts a phone number into the form saying that this is the phone number, but if that does not match with the phone number that they are actually using currently, or the records that you already have, what do? Do you just keep adding phone numbers? Do you want to check the data to make sure that the data is correct? Now, in one sense, you might say, this is not my problem. This is the problem of the business guys on what data to collect and figure out which data is right. But in also one sense, it is your problem, because then you'll have to figure out the data collected. Once it is collected, if it is wrong or whatever the case might be, how do you ensure that the data is deleted from the infrastructure? So, what to collect? Where do you collect it from? What data to be deleted, both from an age point of view, relevance point of view, or context point of view? Let's say you are collecting information about the location. Do you want to keep every single location that the person ever travels, or do you want to take the most common locations that the person is traveling? Just because Venu went to Singapore once in the last 5 years, do you still want to keep track of the fact that he has traveled there? Or do you say, you know what, that is only once in 5 years, so I want to just keep the more common sets of data points only? Then we get into the whole principles that we have to look around that. The accuracy, as I was talking about, of the data itself. Right to know what is the personal data and why to change the personal data. At some point, most of us have changed our phone numbers. If you want to update that phone number into the record of a company, how do you do that? How easy is it to do that? Now the question there, an interesting side question comes up. How many of you know where exactly every piece of information is sitting? Just let's take the phone number that is collected. Are you sure that you know the phone number, the location where the phone number of that particular customer is sitting in all of your infrastructure? So which data points do you want to update? Just one with respect to a particular application, or do you want to allow the customer to come back to you and say, here are all the locations of the phone numbers, or all the phone numbers that are sitting in my infrastructure. What are the pieces of information that you want to update? So getting into updating part of it. Request to be deleted. Now the request to be deleted has, of course, just the customer angle to it. The customer saying that I want my data to be deleted, but there's a regulatory aspect of it and there's a legal aspect of it. Right to be forgotten, right? Somebody wants their information to be taken off the infrastructure itself. How do you handle that? How do you not just handle it, how do you document it? How do you report that? Saying that this is the information that you have on my infrastructure. This is the data that you want to be deleted. This is the proof that it has been deleted. Once again, goes back to the business guy saying, hey, this person has requested for that, just make that happen. It's easy to say make that happen. It is about knowing where the data is sitting and able to actually do that in a fashion that can be traceable back. Now, I was starting to look at the data fiduciary line of things, and then I realized there is a phase that we all go through in collecting the data itself. The owner of the processes or steps at that stage tend to be the business folks. They ask for what data to be collected. They decide what data that they want. They are owning that process of collecting that information itself. Now, once the information is collected, Then it gets into the IT side of things on where it's going to be stored, who has access to it, and once again the whole right to be deleted and all that aspects of things. Then the third angle is the processing. Who has the right to process the information, who has the right to see the information, who has the right to process the information, and what happens with the processed information. All of these become very interesting questions just because, once again, you're looking at the value that the data is giving to the organization itself. Now, as I was preparing these slides, one of the things that I was asking people, and I get very mixed answers, so I couldn't put a role next to that, which is who takes the ownership of the discarding of the data, the deleting of the data itself. I'm not saying how it is going to be done, I'm not saying who is going to do it, I'm saying who is going to take the ownership of that. Meaning, verifying it and saying that yes, it has been, and taking the responsibility if somebody asks a question at a later point that the data has been deleted. Now, the question was not that scary that the power had to go off for that, right? No, but what do you guys think? Who takes the ownership of discard of the data? The business guys. So is that who should be taking or who is taking ownership? Should be. Okay? So who is taking? Are they taking the ownership? They don't want to. Good question, yes. That is a challenge, folks. It is not about who is going to be able to do it. It is not about anything other than who has to take the ownership of that. Because somebody has to sit down at that table and say, hey, yes, I'm going to take the help of the IT team or whoever is required to do what is required, but I will ensure that this has been happening so that when a question comes up, it really goes back to that. Now, I agree with the fact that it has to be the business owner because of the fact that they are the folks that are collecting the information itself. They are deciding what information to collect. And that whole process can really happen only when you start the discussion with them. Right? Now, we are collecting humongous amounts of information itself. The data that is being collected in one simple sense is, broadening or increasing your attack surface. So a few metrics or few areas that I just wanted to highlight in that area. Once again, not that you are not looking at it, but just for you to relook at some of the aspects. The devices that are collecting the information, the devices when they are changing, organizations have tabs being given to their field folks. How do you ensure that the information is, when the devices are changing, is not sitting there and it's not being exposed? The number of apps that are creating, that are accessing the information itself. The places where the data is getting collected. The places where the data is also being stored en route to the whole process itself. And the location of and the store where the data is stored. That especially the location part, if I can highlight that, it gets very murky very quickly because of one simple fact. The business guys want to access information either faster and they want multiple applications to access it, so you might want to, or you might be having data stored in multiple locations just for the ease of business point of view, right? But they will look at it from the ease of business point of view, they will not look at it from the exposure point of view. You keep educating them back saying, hey, great that you want the application to work better and faster and the customer has to be happy, but that also increases the risk that we have because of the data sitting at multiple locations. The risk of data not being able to be updated at multiple locations. And I have a very funny story on this one. And I'm not going to mention the name of the company there. 2 weeks back, I was getting a series of calls. Every day, 4 calls, saying that in August your vehicle insurance is expiring, you need to renew it, so what do you want to renew it ahead of time? And I was getting 4 calls every single day, and I was giving the same answer to them, saying, guys, it is in August. I will come back to it. We still have a bit of time. I'll look at it in June. After the 3rd day, I said, this is not working. And I asked the person to get me to talk to the manager. When I started talking to the manager, then I realized there is a set of my phone number and my name and my vehicle details sitting in each one of the contact centers. Now, one side of that is the customer is a bit upset that they are getting repeated calls even after saying that they are going to do that later. The second aspect is the data is sitting in 4 different locations. And the manager had no clue of how exactly he can escalate that issue back to the main office. All of us have experienced that. And some of your organizations have contact centers. And if there are multiple instances of data sitting there, how do you ensure that the data there is accurate and also is not sitting there forever? That brings us to the very interesting question of visibility and transparency itself. The location of the data stored, the applications that are using the data, and if somebody internally is wanting to know what is the data that is there, where is it sitting, who has access to it, your ability to generate a report quickly and then turn it around and say, hey, this is what we are looking at. I'm not even getting into the last box, which is the statutory part, the regulatory part. Just the internal ability to understand where the data is sitting. You don't need to answer this question, but put a hand on your heart, and how many of you can tell me that you know exactly where every data piece is sitting? It is difficult. Just because of the nature of the beast itself, it is very difficult to do that. So you need to figure out how to generate reports to identify the information, location where it is sitting, and able to generate reports on that. As I said, broad guidelines. One of the discussions that I have been in is around classification of the data, the degree of importance. How do you classify the data that you have collected so that you can apply rules or guidelines to that one? What data cannot be copied to multiple locations? What data can be copied? What data is personally identifiable information that you might have to be a bit more careful about? What is just location information without any tag to the customer name itself, just classifying the information itself? Then getting into the discussion about how and where the data can be used within the organization. And the logical extension of that is the partners that you are going to be working with. What kind of information will you allow the partner to access? No business will do all of the tasks by themselves, so the challenge of what data can be accessed by the partner, what data cannot be accessed by the partner, what applications can be accessed by the partner, all of that becomes a discussion itself. And last but not least, something personally I am passionate about is the lifespan of the data. Two reasons for that. One is from a relevance point of view. The other one is from a regulatory point of view. Well, how long can you keep a piece of information once you collect that? How long is the piece of information that you have collected relevant so that the businesses can do the processing and do the analysis and they can actually benefit from that? So, I will leave you guys with this one last slide. Archive or delete. When do you want to archive or delete? What and how are you going to report on the archive and the delete part? What's that? Well, there are sometimes the business might actually say that I don't want the information anymore, so I want it to be deleted or archived, whatever the case might be, for the time period, right? So you have to look at those aspects. As the gentleman rightly pointed out, there is the customer angle to that, and there is, of course, the business angle to that. Because putting the information on active storage is also cost.
Normally, where there is a government law or a regulatory requirement, you archive it. And if it is not required, like for example, even if the customer says, I cannot delete the transaction data because the Anti-Money Laundering Act requires
Agree.
storage, but I can't keep it in active database because of performance as well as security issue. So I move them into
the archive itself, right? So getting the business to understand that aspect of it. It's very easy to say, I don't need the information anymore, nikal do. Boss, nikalna is not the answer for every single thing, as you guys rightly pointed out. Sometimes nikalna means putting it to one side, sometimes nikalna is actually nikalna, right? So getting into that discussion itself, and from the little that I've gotten from all of the discussion that happened yesterday, the more you interact with the businesses, the more you understand the businesses, and the more they are aware of the risks that are associated to that, the better, hopefully, the discussion is going to be. So with that, thank you very much for the opportunity, and hope that has given you a sense of thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Venu. It's a great honor and pleasure to have you. Thank you very much for your valuable time.